now it's gonna be in my head.
What's
the
that?
rest of the night. So when I start, everyone wants to roll in my head, break out into song, you'll know that.
She's gonna have earworms for a long time.
We'll just join along, that's all.
It is, it'll be.
I know it will.
Michelle, I did a bad thing. I need to borrow a pen from you. Is that okay?
I'm sorry, what?
Please don't be disorderly, Liz.
I'm good, thank you. I'm not disorderly. You need to calm down.
Okay.
Evening, sir.
And Mr.
Not much, boss.
Mr. Astorino. Mr. Astorino, keep peace in here tonight. Have him put his glasses away because it's making people nervous that he has a video camera on it or whatever you want to call it. Now you need to speak up and control your people.
Nobody controls me.
You want to make a bet? Call Mr. Astorino.
Please go sit down.
Okay.
Well, if he's not going to control, somebody needs to. If I got to follow the rules, everybody follows the rules. You know I'm right.
You're gonna look at the
It's that darn executive session. I put him in my collar and took him home.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, July 25th, 2017 regular caucus meeting for the City of Brook Park. I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Scott?
Here.
Bergio?
Here.
Salvatore?
Here.
Troyer?
Here.
Powers? McDonald? Here. Mancini?
I want to note that Councilman Mancini and Councilwoman Jan Powers and Jimmy Mancini and Jan Powers both contacted the office. They were not able to make it. Councilman Mancini announced beforehand he wouldn't be able to make it, so they'll both be listed as excused absences. I would ask everyone to please stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to item 3 on the agenda, which is approval of the minutes of the preceding meetings. Number 1 we have is a regular caucus meeting that was held on June 27th, 2017.
Motion approved.
Support.
There's been a motion to approve, properly supported. Is there any discussion on approval? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Scott?
Yes.
Bergio?
Yes.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Troyer,
Yes.
McDaniel,
Yes.
The regular caucus meeting that was held on June 27th, 2017, those minutes have been approved. That concludes the items under number 3. We'll move to item number 4, which is discussion. The first item there is the 2014-2015 Rules of Council versus the 2016-2017 Rules of Council comparison by Councilman Salvatore per Council President Astorino. This was moved by motion from the June 27th, 2017 caucus meeting to include the 2014-2015 council rules. So council, this is open for discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's quite obvious to me that the votes aren't there to go back to the whole set of rules as I had discussed at the last meeting. Therefore, I'd like to talk about at least 3 of them tonight, and recommend that or if the votes are there, to put them on under verbal approval at the next council meeting. The first one being, I would like to, if everyone has a copy of the rules, I would like to refer to rule number 28, the website and email communication, and I would just like to eliminate that altogether right out of the rules. That's my proposal, open for discussion.
Councilwoman McDonald, go ahead.
I have a couple statements and questions about the website. So one of the things that I did is I kind of compared our website to surrounding cities around us, and I noticed that Berea has the city council information directly on their website. They have the phone number and the address of all council members available to their residents. Middleburg Heights has address and phone number and a little blurb about what each person does. North Olmsted has a bio of the council people, and they also have a constant email, I guess. It matches all the rest of the employees or people, I guess, who work for North Olmsted. So I guess I do have a couple questions about our personal website. When you Google Brook Park City Council, in order, the City of Brook Park's website comes up first, which I found interesting as far as I know, and I could be wrong, so if anyone knows this information, they can let me know later. Depending on how many hits you get is how it gets ordered. brookpark.com website was like 4th or 5th. So that was one of the questions that I had is, so if City Council's website comes from the City of Brook Park website, why do we need 2 websites? And also some questions that I'd like clarified is who owns the domain for the website? Who is considered the webmaster? How many hits do we get on the page? And what were the benefits or the reasons for? Because a lot of the links that I found are not active as far as the newsletter. And then Mayor, I don't know how I address this, but is there any rule or anything that says that Brook Park council members could not have an email address through the City of Brook Park?
Okay, it was the administration's recommendation that we just have one website, so the answer to your question is no, everything could be on one website.
Okay.
Okay, the only large cities like Cleveland do I believe that they're 2 separate and segregated systems, but that was what council's preference was at the time, and no, I don't see any plausible reason why we shouldn't be all on one.
Okay, thanks.
Councilman Scott?
Yes, I've never been in favor of this. I wasn't in favor when we first talked about it, but we won't go back onto why that happened. I went, and I've only used this website twice, and that was just in the past 2 weeks. And basically, what I did is I wanted to go back into history and find out how many actual emails I got from residents and/or council. And from January 1st, 2016, I got 18. I have 6 residents that emailed me. 2 of them, one is Brandy Reynolds. Everybody here that emailed me, I talked to but 2 people. So I don't know how many people actually use this website. I don't know how many council members use this website, but in my personal opinion, all my information is out on my my other email address. I get the email address. I get email from that address. Like I said, I've had 18 email messages since the 1st of January 1st, 2016. So, like I said, I was not in favor of this. I don't think it's necessary. I think we should just run off the city's website. I think it's useless. That's all I got. Thank you.
Councilman Bergio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rarely used it also, and I think actually I think it's more convenient to have one website, because then you might think, I better check the other one too, because something else might come in on that one. So I think it's more efficient to have one website, so you're not overlooking it. So I think it'd be easier and more efficient to have one website, so we can just check that so we don't miss something. Because there's been months and months and months that I haven't really checked that website, and when I have, there was really nothing on there pertaining to me. I don't think anybody used that to get a hold of me. So I don't know if it's really was that useful. I mean, it may have been a good concept to begin with, and I forgot the reasons why we thought about doing that, but I don't think it's really been used very efficiently, so I don't see the need for it at this time. I think the main website, the city's website, would be sufficient in my opinion.
Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. So it appears whatever the 3 or 4 changes, whatever it was, the votes are there for that. So I will try to refrain from saying a few things I want to say, but I use the website a lot. The council clerk uses the website. We don't have any other method besides your own email to get anything to us at this point. Currently, we only have our website and our council email addresses. Our council email addresses are attached to your current private email address. So when somebody sends you a council email, it's attached, so it goes to your private email. So saying that you just found out you had 18 doesn't really make any sense, because it should have been attached came to your private email. If you use your private email for city business, people can request all your emails. There's a reason to have it separate. This is the one reason it was done this way. So if you want to have anybody be able to request in an open sorry. Be able to request all your emails and get all your personal emails, then you just go ahead and keep doing it that way and not have a separate way of doing it, because that's the reason we did it. And also, I don't care if one resident uses our web page or our site, because that one resident was able to get information that they needed. And one resident is enough reason to have it out there so the residents can be informed, because that's what we're supposed to be all about. And that's what I'm all about. So removing this and not having this and not having some kind of a real alternative that can be updated immediately, like this has been, as far as our council agendas, our council legislative on our agenda, and those kind of things. Unless there's a replacement, it's a big mistake to kill this website. So again, I use it all the time. And if you get an email from Michelle, it's being used. Thank you.
Councilwoman McDonald?
I totally agree with you with the personal emails, and I don't think anyone who, I started a new email specifically for this job, but I have to tell you that it doesn't matter if it's a personal email address or the brookparkcitycouncil.com address, it's all public information. But my concern is I don't know who owns the website, who is in charge of making sure that who has access to those emails or not. If you put it through the city's website, it'll go through the same safety measures that the other pages on the City of Brook Park go through as well. No one can tell me, or no one has told me, who is in charge of making sure that the separate account that we're paying for, who is in charge of looking through all those. That's the first thing. Second of all, when you go to the City of Brook Park's page, and I think what we have to clarify here is that the City of Brook Park, City Council has its own page. On that page, you can find caucus agendas, you can find the minutes, you can find the live streaming, you can find contact information for all of the city council members. The only thing we do need to change is it says 2015 instead of 2017-18. But when I requested information to be changed from my personal email to my my council Gmail account, it was instantaneous. That I got an email back within maybe, 15 minutes saying that already happened. So I think if we're talking about making it easier for the residents, if you go to the City of Brook Park page or website and go to council page, everything that you need is right there. The newsletter, which was a separate button on the council, the brookpark.com account, and the pictures and all of those, they're not even active buttons. So if we're going to use a tool, first of all, I don't even know who you would even ask to update information. I know that when I was getting my email and number out, that the brookpark.com account wasn't as current with my updated information as the City of Brook Park. I mean, we all have to, you said it yourself, is that time is precious, and I agree with that. If I know that I can get information on a website and I can send it to someone who can do it for me, and I know that it's safe, then I would prefer to use that. And I agree, we heard from the mayor today that we could have a consistent City of Brook Park email address that I think would be beneficial for all our residents, because if they're getting hold of anyone else, they could get a hold of us the same as that. So I'm thinking safety. I agree with you.
I thought he answered no to that, but
No, I think he just said that it could be possible that the reason it was denied was because that was a decision that council had made regardless, but we could bring it up again, unless I'm wrong, unless I misheard. But,
You heard correctly. It was council's desire to have a separate system.
and he just
Check
said
the
that we could
minutes.
have.
We recommended against it, but council has the right. If that's what they're comfortable with, that's fine. That was their choice at the time.
Council, the only thing I can get you some of the answers. I don't have them off the top of my head on what you asked, and I will provide those for you before the next meeting. But the other thing on the comments that were made that I simply want to make a comment is, our Council Rule 28 that's in existence now says each council member shall be assigned a uniform email address, for example, your name at brookparkcitycouncil.com, to be used to conduct all city-related business. Council emails may not be used for personal reasons, and personal emails should not be used to conduct city business.
Correct.
But we've had two council members here state that they've never used the council email. So for the last year and a half, we've got people saying that the council site's not working, it's not doing this, when they haven't been using it.
I guess, and I think we need to clarify, are you talking site or email address? Because Mr. Troyer did bring up is that you get forwarded. And I can't answer of why, but there are some issues of knowing who owns the domain, who has access to those emails, versus using a system that is owned by a city who has HR people whose job it is to make sure the safety and security of those emails, or if they're being requested out for public information, that there's access to that. I guess that's my concern.
Okay. Councilman Scott?
Yeah, let me clarify something real quick, okay? When I said personal business, what I was referring to is like was stated, everything is forwarded through the council, to my email address. I do not conduct city business on a personal email, on my personal email. I was referring to everything that is forwarded to my email address is what is in the council, if I'm not correct, right? What is forwarded from the,
You said you had 18 emails in a year and a half, or since the beginning of this year.
I have 18 emails from, I should have clarified, 18 emails from non-council personnel. Okay, Dan Eberhardt, Beth Borch, Mario Russo, Brandy Reynolds, Von Dune, Ginny Sally, Rudolph Ramick, David Cheers, Rob Slattery, Margaret Houston. Okay, those are emails I received, non-council, anybody associated with the council. Okay, that's what I was referring to, as I should have been more clarified. I got 18 non-city council associates that emailed me on a city website. That's it, on the council website. But everything else has been forwarded to me that is on the council chair, the council website. So I want to clarify it. It was 18 non-council people.
Thank you for the clarification, because I know I've sent you more than 18 emails.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to
Every email
clarify.
I send to you, I send to you.
It also is forwarded to
to
my
city council,
other
it goes to your other one.
RDS, yes. R. Scott, yes. So I wanted to clarify that, okay?
Okay, thank you. Councilman Bergio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to say the same thing. I have a regular council email, and they do get forwarded to me, but I don't specifically, even though I have cards made out for that, that email address on that one, but they do come to my council email, so, yeah, they do get redirected, so just clarification on that, too.
Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I understand and concur with Councilwoman McDonald's issue with who can see them. And I think that's a question that has to be answered. But I can go, and I can see your point on that. But I can go on the other side and say, okay, who in the administration, when it goes on the city website, who's going to have control of that, and who in the administration is going to be able to do things with those emails and have control of that? I can have the same concern. So I think what we need to do is find somebody that's neutral and would have control of this, and that we all can agree on, and we can all be on the same page that this is going to be handled properly. So as far as our emails are concerned, I think that's a concern. I think that's a better way of doing the emails. And the website, if you know, the reason this website came in the existence is because the administration at the time was not getting everything posted.
Okay.
The things weren't there. The things were, our agendas weren't there. There was all
That's not
kinds, people couldn't find stuff. That's the reason we did it.
That's not true.
If that can be cured, and I imagine it has been over the last month or so, but you know, then maybe okay, we can do it that way instead. But the fact of the matter is, no matter what anybody says, it wasn't updated. Our agendas weren't up there, and this is why we did this. And let me remind everybody that these rules were voted on unanimously to adopt these rules. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
That was 18 months ago.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay, everything the councilman just said about problems with our website is factually not true. The reality is
Point of order.
What's your point of order, Councilman?
I just wanted to be able to talk for a second because that's inaccurate what the mayor's saying.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
I'm
You interrupted my testimony.
Mr. Mayor, I'm asking him what his point of order
Okay,
is
well,
first.
he just said so he could
He's
keep talking.
disparaging a council member.
No, I'm not. I just said it was factually not true. I disagree with your facts that you stated. The reason you have a separate website is Councilman McCormick was elected who had expertise in it. and council, mostly you, see ghosts behind every rock. The administration can administer as many emails and processes that are necessary within the city. Quite frankly, my folks would probably appreciate not having to deal with council's operation. We are one city. So council made a determination that they wanted to have a separate website, unlike any other city our size, for reasons not related with any problems. Okay, so whether you keep it yourselves or work with us on it is really no consequence to me. So, but what you stated is factually not correct. Thank you.
Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I wish there was more people here that had those issues at the time, but the last council. But we'll just say this is an opinion, but no, it's not, because you said facts. Facts are that things weren't posted in a timely manner, and that's how I remember it, and that's how it was. And if there was a way to go back, I mean, we can go back and check it when things were posted. There's probably still things not posted, because on our website, when things are passed, they're posted with the date they're passed and everything. I can go back and find anything that was passed, when it was passed, and read the legislation that was passed. And I don't know. I don't think you can do that on the city's website until recently. So thank you.
Okay, Councilman Salvatore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that Rachel has brought up a very interesting point. Who does control this website? And is there an ownership involved other than the city council? I mean, is there any answers to those questions that we're able to get, that we might be able to find out tonight?
Councilman, I can't give you the technical answers because I'm not, I'd have to look at the records, but I'm the one that does the administration of it. I'm the one that puts the documents on there. What happens is the council clerk, once either the minutes are passed or the agenda is prepared or the legislation has been passed and everything, she forwards me that file, and then I place it onto the website.
Does anyone other than a member of council or the clerk have access to this?
Not as the administrator, no.
Pardon?
I have the password for being the administrator. Clerk does not have.
I have nothing to do with the
She-
website. I send it to
she-
him.
she sends
I
me
send
the
it
information.
to the city's webmaster, and they post it. I have nothing to do with the website.
Do you send it PDF forms in both?
They
in
are
both?
PDF forms,
So
yes.
basically what you're saying is that you would basically post or send the or whoever's in charge of the webmaster for City Brook Park, the same document that you would save there, and then they're both uploaded depending on who's uploading it.
Correct.
But then all the emails that you send us goes through the City Brook Park,
She has a City of Brook Park email.
so all of our
Unless you
information.
told me where
Right,
you
so
want me
all
to
of
send it
our,
to.
all the information that you send us via whoever comes from the City of Brook Park website.
Correct.
That they allotted to you. Okay.
Any other discussion on rule number 28? Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Just one last thing. I'd like everybody to keep in mind that we are a separate entity, so to speak, a separate branch of government than the administration. And that's one of the reasons we should have this. We are a separate branch of government, and this is why we should have something separate. If it's redundant, there's nothing wrong with being redundant if it is, because the more information we get out there to people, the better. Now, there is a question of who's administering it, and it's not really a question anymore, but things need to be answered, and we need to come up with a way that we're all comfortable with who's administering it, and that it's a neutral person. But there's nothing wrong with us having a separate website, because we are a separate entity, branch, again, of government. Thank you.
And just before you get into it, as far as being separate, I mean, early on, you could see in the rule, it also talked about that our site would be linked from the city website. So the intent was for the city of Brook, if someone was on the city of Brook Park and they clicked on the Brook Park Council,
You could go
they would just go right to ours. The administration, when requested to do that, said they would not do that for us. So that's a case of that, and that is factually correct.
Well, I guess one of the reasons
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
why I'm a rule follower, so I've looked at this Rule 28 for a long time, knowing that I know that different people are doing it differently. But again, I think part of showing that we are representing the residents that we are representing, we are part of, I mean, essentially, we're working for the residents of City of Brook Park. So why we can't trust the fact that the City of Brook Park website could post actual information that we want is a little upsetting to me. And if you look at all the cities around us, and we can't compare, but every other city, their council or has a page on the website. So, I mean, if it's a matter of rethinking about how the information is posted, I get it, and I get information, but I still feel like when you Google City of Brook Park City Council, City of Brook Park website comes up first with our webpage. So I really would love to know how many people are actually accessing the information from that particular website. Because honestly, most people, when they contact me, it's either through Messenger or phone or the 44142 RJM Gmail account that I use. And I have 7 different emails for all of my different jobs. I just feel like if we can show unity in this one particular area, I think we would be moving in the right direction.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay, your facts are correct in your last statement, because what we said, it was council's desire to have their own independent website. And so therefore, we determined they should have that independent website. Because we were concerned, just like you are, that people outside the administration could have some effect on the operation of our website. So you had the person with expertise, she's no longer here, that had that, and you desired that. So it was your desire, not ours. And if you're determining that you are an independent administrator of a website, the administration would be concerned about that. So again, we can both go back and forth, I think, what the councilman's trying to say. Just exactly what I said. I wouldn't trust you. I've seen it. That's correct, sir. Absolutely. And I have good reason to do so. So at any rate, write that down, because that's a fact.
Well, I don't need to write it down.
Okay, write it down, because I do not.
It's on
I
tape.
have not, it's good, I'm glad it's on tape, because I do not trust you. I don't believe the people of the city should trust you, but we have an election coming forward. We've seen the actions of folks here. At any rate, it
Yeah,
was
I've
your
seen a lot of
desire.
actions of you.
Good, and I wish you would have had the guts to run for mayor instead of hiding behind others, but you didn't. So at any rate, what I'm saying to you is this.
So much for
You
unity, Mr.
have
McDonald.
Mr. Astorino, anytime you would like to debate before the people of the city, count me in. At any rate,
Well, we're talking
you
about
desire,
Rule-
I'm trying to stay to that,
we're
you
talking about
desire,
Rule 28, Mayor.
you
You're
desire.
going off on
No, I'm
campaign stuff
talking
and
about Rule 28. You made a statement, okay, about our position, the administration's position was that if you wanted your own website, it would not be linked to ours, for the same doubts that you had about us, we had about you. So let's be clear about it. So if council wants to have their own website, we have no objections to that. You're entitled to do that. But if you're going to join with us, join with us. I don't care if you change the rule or not. But to sit here and disparage us over a decision that you made, that you clearly drove, you had the expertise here, that's fine. So go forward or not go forward, but don't get us, the administration, involved in a decision that you were clearly part of. That's all I'm saying to
There
you.
was no disparaging of the administration by me. I just simply said that when we requested that you would just simply link our website from yours, and you said, no, you would not do that. That's not disparaging.
And we
That's-
stated the reasons.
Instead, you chose to just duplicate what we're doing. Instead of just saying, if somebody would click on council and it came to ours, they'd get the same information that they're getting.
Councilman,
going
who had the
that way.
website
So-
first? You were duplicating us.
so-
Fractured fairy
There was no
tales.
disparaging. So Councilman Salvatore, I think we've talked enough about Rule 28.
yes.
You had two other rules that you were looking to change, I think, too?
Yeah, well, I would like to conclude with Rule 28 and add it to the council agenda and eliminate Rule 28 and have council join the City of Brook Park website.
Support that.
Desire.
I support that.
So the motion is to put Rule 28 on the next council agenda
For elimination.
for under verbal approval,
To
For the
to
deletion.
eliminate it.
To eliminate.
the deletion of Rule 28.
Correct.
Yes, yes, sir.
I wanted to clarify what yours, okay. Okay, I think we've discussed it enough. Anyone have any last words? Councilman Troyer?
Sure. This is just one more way for the mayor and the administration to try to control council, and I'm totally against it. Thank you.
Any other discussion on placing Rule 28?
Would we have to be specific as far as putting in there,
It's going to be deleted, it's for the purpose of deleting it.
if we wanted to add that each city of council person has a website, or not a website, a email address associated through City of Brook Park, do we need to include that as well?
No, we'd have to create another rule for that, I think. This is just deleting.
So this would be deleting
This is
it?
just to delete Rule 28.
How would you add a new rule? Or vote on a new rule? As far as having a uniform email that each person on city council would have, regardless of how long you sit in the seat. So for instance, council at large, City of Brook Park Council at large, how many of us are there? Each of that email address would stay consistent regardless of who's sitting in the seat until that person leaves. And then whoever takes over that seat would get that email address.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman, go ahead.
if I may. It would be a similar process as we're doing right now to add another rule to these rules would then require discussion,
Okay.
introduction and discussion at a caucus and then moved on to a council
Okay,
agenda for verbal approval to either adopt it or defeat it, one or the other.
okay, thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, I'll ask the clerk please call the roll on placing Rule 28 on the next council agenda.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Troyer,
No.
McDonald,
Yes.
4-1.
Okay, Rule 28 has been placed on the next council agenda under letter, I think it's J it'll be under?
Yes.
That's for deletion, right?
I'm sorry, what?
That's to vote on getting, to remove it, correct?
Deletion.
Eliminate it.
Yes,
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
okay. Councilman Salvatore?
Yes, if council wouldn't mind going to Rule 21. Now, I know we had a debate on this at the time of the change, and I wasn't in favor of it, and I'm going to try one more time to go back to the 96-hour rather than the 24-hour. All communications requested to be read in council meetings, copies shall be given to the members of council not less than 96 hours rather than the 24. My argument today is the same as it was then. If, with the 24-hour rule, that particular item that was going to be read, it was never posted. No one in an audience would even know that was even available to be put on the agenda without the 96-hour rule. The 96-hour rule was very effective over the years. It worked. And there was also a clause in the event of an emergency, if somebody needed to have something read that evening they couldn't make it, or they had to, if it came up late, that by a majority vote of council, that could be read anyway. But it had to be done by vote of council rather than done by a rule that's already pre-printed. So all I'm asking council is to consider taking the 24-hour prior to council meeting rule and putting it back to the 96-hour.
I agree with that.
I like that.
Okay, council, any discussion? Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. if we could add a rule, if we could do that and then add a rule that we could not, with the majority vote of council, add its communications to a meeting, because the way I see it, let's tell it like it is. So what happens then is certain people don't get it read, certain people, council approves it, depending on what side they're on. That's what you're looking at here. So unless we can add a rule where it's in stone, 96 hours, otherwise it doesn't get read, I'm not for this change.
Okay, and for Councilman Donald, since you weren't involved in this, in the setup of why it was reduced from 96 to 24, the 96-hour requirement would occur actually prior to us even posting our agenda. So the concern is this has always been the 96-hour requirement. People haven't even had a chance to see the agenda, and they would have already had to submit anything that they wanted to write about that's on the next Tuesday's agenda.
Okay.
So it was changed to 24 because we felt that if we got it on Monday, they would have had a chance to look at it over the weekend. If they weren't able to make it to a meeting or just needed to make some input, they could do that on Monday, and it would give us 24 hours to look at it. And then it would be read in its entirety anyway, which is something that if we don't post stuff, it has to be read in its entirety. But that's why it was changed from 96 to 24, is the 96 hours, most of the members of council felt is too cumbersome for the residents, because they have to actually submit their letter by Friday afternoon when the agenda hasn't even, they're either at work and haven't seen the agenda, they don't know what's on the agenda yet. So if they want to write to us about,
there wasn't like a 48-hour? I mean,
it's a
why
weekend.
did we go?
It happens on the weekend, so there's no way for them to get it to us on the weekend. We post our agendas Friday afternoon, and it isn't until Monday that we're back at the office to take it. So the 48 hours are actually Saturday and Sunday are lost, plus from 5 o'clock to midnight is lost. So there's 55 hours that are lost for midnight plus the 8 hours. So there's over 60 hours of the 96 hours were lost.
So how did it work when it was 96 prior to this decision? Can you give me background on that?
They would not be able to write to us about anything that was on the agenda because they wouldn't have known. They might have written about something else that they wanted to talk to council about.
But they could, after watching the agenda for that day, they could write it after council?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Salvatore.
thank you. Over the years, with my recollection, there was very few letters ever presented to council with the 96-hour rule that pertained to items on the agenda. Most of them were personal things. Cutting it down to 24 hours, it doesn't really even give the clerk ample time to even verify the letter, to verify the validity of the letter, to verify that the person who signed the letter was actually the person who is requesting whatever the comment they're going to make. And in reference to what Councilman Troyer mentioned about, I don't know if I heard you correctly or not, but your concern was if you had 4 votes, the letter would get read. If it didn't, it wouldn't. Depending on what team you're on, I didn't know we had teams up here. I thought we were here operating in the best interest of the city. I think having the ability to verify a letter before it's even suggested that it be read is important. I think the clerk should have an ample time to verify that letter, to verify the person who's sending it, verify the signature, and verify the fact that what's in that letter should be read at a council meeting. And that was the reason. It's worked for many, many years. We've never had a problem with it. I've never had anybody say to me, boy, I wish he would have had 24 hours. I could have got that letter read. That's never happened. I think this is just safeguards to make sure that things are being followed. The clerk has ample time, and the members of council have ample time to look at the letters that may be proposed to be read, regardless if it's against a member of council or if it's against something that's going on in the city or if it pertains to legislation, which I can't recall too many letters that were written about legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion, council? Councilman Schroyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Again, if we're going to change this to 96, we should also remove the second sentence, which reads, this 24-hour well, it would read, this 96-hour requirement may be waived by the majority members of council for for communications requesting to be read, which are received less than 96 hours prior to the council meeting. That line, if we're changing it to 96 hours, that sentence should be removed. It's the only way I'd vote for it. Thank you.
So you're sorry.
Councilman,
So you're basically saying that if they miss the 96-hour deadline, that it could be read the following meeting?
Correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Salvatore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Mr. Troyer, I disagree with that theory because the last time I checked, this was a council meeting, and the council meeting is to be controlled by the majority voting members of council. Therefore, the majority members of council could waive that rule by design to assist a resident to allow them to have their letter read for maybe they did miss that 96 hours and they want to be heard. Now, nothing is stopping anybody from going to that microphone during audience participation and reading a letter themselves. They can do that. That rule will not interfere with that. So they have the right to do that.
Correct.
But I think that council should have the right to waive any rule by a majority vote.
Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I think the reason we have the communications in a letter form to be read by the clerk is because these are people who can't make it to a council meeting. Of course, somebody that can make it could read whatever they want or within reason and say whatever they want at the lectern. But the reason we have this is so that people can't make it to the meeting, so they have a way of communicating with council. So I don't know that that made any sense that, if they could come up, they'd come up. So, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to place Rule 21 on the agenda for consideration under verbal approval to change the 24-hour rule to 96 hours.
Support.
Okay, council, you've heard the motion. It's been properly supported. Is there any other discussion? Seeing no other discussion, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Salvatore,
Yes?
Giorgio.
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Troyer,
No.
So Rule 21 will be placed on the next council agenda for verbal approval. Councilman Salvatore, you had one more?
Yes, I do. I would like council to refer to Rule 5. And what I'd like to do is add a caucus meeting prior to the council meeting.
You'd like to add a caucus meeting prior to council?
Yes.
You could clarify, Councilman, for me, are you, first and third are our council meetings, and second and fourth were caucus. Are you eliminating the second and fourth?
No.
You're just adding a caucus?
Just adding a caucus meeting prior to the council meeting for the purpose of helping and allowing legislation to move freely through the system, to give us an opportunity to discuss the agenda prior to a council meeting if there's going to be any changes. It's nothing new. It's something that's gone on for years. It was a change that was made that I really didn't like when we did it, and all I'm trying to do is put it back. I'm not trying to change the caucuses as they exist today. So we'll be picking up 2 additional caucus meetings.
Total of six total meetings then.
Pardon?
6 total meetings.
6 meetings, he said.
6 meetings total.
Two
Right,
plus
we
the
would have,
existing 4.
in other words, we would, on the first
We had
and third
2 more caucus
Tuesdays,
meetings.
we'd have a caucus meeting and then a council meeting. And then on the second and fourth, we'd have just caucus meetings. So we'd have 6 meetings a month.
Correct.
6, yeah.
Is there a start time that you wanted for the caucus
That's my
meeting?
question.
Well, just so that we don't have to make a lot of changes, I think I'd leave it at 7 o'clock. The caucus would be at 7 and the council would be at 7:30 on those days. And the other 2 Tuesdays, the caucuses would remain at 7 o'clock.
Council's open for discussion. Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I'd just like to ask Mr. Salvatore, you said, what were your words, to help speed up our legislation? In what way would this help?
I didn't
Us.
say, I didn't say speed
What
up.
were your words?
I said
so I-
it would help the legislation.
So I can stand
move-
corrected?
Move freely through the system.
Freely, okay, you said, what do you mean by help the legislation move freely through the system?
If we have something to discuss, it'll be on a caucus meeting prior to the council meeting.
What's that?
We could have an agenda prepared with items on the caucus meeting prior to a council meeting for discussion.
So this is not gonna be a caucus on the items on the council? It's gonna be separate items?
Absolutely. Correct.
Can you clarify that? I misunderstood what that was. The caucus meeting that's preceding the council meeting,
Correct.
what's on the agenda?
Pardon?
What will be on the agenda for that caucus meeting?
Anything that we put on it, anything that you put on it. If they have something to discuss, there was many times in the past where we'd have a caucus prior to the council meeting just to discuss the council agenda for the meeting that was gonna follow that caucus meeting. Changes that were gonna be made, something that was gonna be taken off the agenda. It was all done at a caucus meeting. I mean, this is nothing new. I didn't just pull this out of the air. We've always had a caucus prior to a council meeting, as far back as I can remember. Up until this past 18 months or so.
Seriously? You don't remember a meeting on the first and third for council and the second and fourth for caucus meetings? You
Yes,
don't
we-
remember that any
Oh,
time?
yeah, no, we did that, but we also had a caucus prior to the council.
But the caucus that's prior to the council, there could be anything on the agenda, placed on the agenda. It's not restricted to the items that are on the caucus, on the council agenda.
No, you could add something to it on Friday. I mean, it's a standard caucus meeting prior to a council meeting.
Well, because as you know, from that rule, it's the office of council president sets the agenda. And part of your thing was you wanted to help the legislation to move freely through. So I
What?
thought the purpose of, I thought when you
You're gonna be able to
initially
do that.
stated, I thought your purpose was to maybe have some discussion about what's on the council agenda so that that moves freely through. But you're saying it's a,
You would be able to prepare a caucus agenda prior to the council agenda as president of council. And if somebody wanted to pull something out of a committee, say Tom Troyer wanted to talk about something that was sitting in his committee for several months, it could be put on that caucus prior to the council meeting, and if council so desired, it could be moved from that caucus onto the council agenda.
okay. Would have appreciated if you used myself as an example instead, because I'm not as,
I was just using him because he was waving at me. I thought he wanted me to use his name.
yeah, I know. Councilman, anyone else?
Yes.
Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Well, I remember when it changed. I think it was it's probably 2008, 2009, somewhere in there, when it was changed from what we do now to the to the only 2 meetings, 4 meetings a month, but two on the same day, where it was caucus before the council, back when the council meetings were very, very short. And everything appeared to be predetermined. And I vow to not have to end that process and have discussion up here. I know some people don't like the discussion and me asking questions and talking and getting things out there, and I do that primarily because for the people out there watching and for the minutes, and so the people out there know what's going on. So you just heard basically what this is going to end up doing is fast tracking. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. What's going to happen is, and they'll be arguing, there'll be commotion over it, but what's going to happen is this is going to change. The votes are there. It wouldn't have been brought up if the votes weren't there. What's going to happen is we're going to have these extra meetings before. Things are going to start being brought up under discussion instead of being introduced at a council introduced at a council meeting and then put into a committee like they're supposed to and then brought out. What's going to happen is things are going to be brought up at these new caucus meetings. They're going to be brought up under discussion, and then the votes are going to be there to immediately put them on the next council meeting to try to fast track legislation and not have it going in the committee. This has been done a few times in the last few months to test the water, so to speak, I believe. So what's going to happen is things are going to try to be fast tracked on the same night, caucus, right in the council, get the first reading. Now at that point, I'm sure that'll be asked to suspend the rules and try to pass a legislation on one evening, which can be done. And then again, what's going to happen down the road is all of a sudden it'll be brought up. Well, we pretty much don't have anything at these, second and third caucus meetings, so we'll want to come back and change the rules to eliminate those at least one of those extra caucus meetings because we won't need them because everything will be brought up in this method I just described because it's already happened a few times over the last few months. So, and this is a concern because this is what I've worked on the last 3.5 years to try and make council more open, make the discussion here like it's supposed to be, like all legislation says in open deliberations. It's all our ordinances say that, and that's all I've wanted to do the last 3.5 years is be open to the public. And I think what this does is again fast track things. It's an attempt to fast track things. It's an attempt to keep things out of committee, so that's what this is about. And again, I'll be against it because I think these rules are good how they are, and I think they've worked well to get an open discussion. So that's how I feel, and thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Salvatore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know what legislation you're referring to about being fast-tracked, but unless you're referring to the legislation that was introduced out of a purse sent up for consideration that never even made it to the law director, if that's what you're referring to, having a caucus meeting at any time would have never fixed that problem. And I think having a caucus meeting prior to the council meeting adds some type of structure, some type of a mechanism that puts things in its proper perspective as it pertains to legislation. And as far as fast tracking, it's impossible to fast track if you don't have the votes to suspend. And I think you know that. I think you've been around long enough to understand that. I shouldn't have to remind you, because you're very good at holding up legislation by not suspending, because that's how you feel, and that's your prerogative, and I respect that. All I'm trying to do is put legislation into a form of a meeting, a legitimate meeting that has the opportunity for people to come and speak if they wish, come and watch the caucus meeting, knowing full well what's going to be on it. And it has nothing whatsoever to do with fast-tracking anything, because there's already rules in place to prohibit that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, counsel, I would like to point out, just from my perspective on the caucus meeting, is I almost think you'd almost have to change the rule on council meetings too, because our council meetings are supposed to start at 7 o'clock. And somehow I have a feeling, I mean, figure out which rule that is. That's rule number 3. Every first and third Tuesday, it'll start at 7 PM. So if we're going to change this rule to make it the caucus starting at 7 o'clock, we're going to have to make a change to that rule also. And I would suggest that the rule be, I don't know if you want to, I mean, I know your intent is to say at 7:30 start the council meeting, but I think you're being rather optimistic, thinking caucus meetings are only going to be 25 minutes long and allow us to start at 7:30. So you know.
Well, we're not eliminating the other 2 standing caucus meetings, so I think that the 2 meetings prior to a council meeting should be right around a 30-minute window.
Well, I mean, if it was just on items on the agenda, I would think that would be, but you've said it's a wide open agenda. Anything could be added on to it.
If you add on to it, then we're gonna know exactly how much time we're gonna need.
And then, you know, and like I said, if we put the rule on that you're suggesting, it's going to conflict with rule number 3. So I'm just pointing out that you're gonna need 2 changes. If you're gonna do that one, you're gonna need to have another change on rule number 3 for the regular meetings, because we can't start both of them at 7 PM.
I agree with you.
Okay.
You're right.
I'm pointing that out since you're making these changes, proposing these changes. Councilman Bergio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is going to go back for a ways, but when we had televised council meetings by the local networks, Cablevision, Complex Cable, like I said, it's really dating me, but sometimes we did go over. Our meeting started at 8 o'clock, and our caucuses were 7:30, and sometimes they did go over, and they did start televising it 10 minutes later or whatever. So I don't know if that's really a concern. I think we could still, I mean, I'm okay with changing the other meeting too, but I don't know if we really have to. 'Cause I think that did happen.
I think you'd need to change the rule, because otherwise you have both meetings starting at 7 PM. That's the rule right now for regular council meetings, is it starts at 7 o'clock. His proposal is the caucus meeting's gonna start at 7, so he's gonna need to change that one. I'm just pointing that out. I mean, there's no way around that. You can, I mean, you can disagree on, I think one of the reasons that we changed it from them both being on the same night is we like the idea, the majority of members of council like the idea of saying if we're gonna start a council meeting at 7 o'clock, that we start at 7 o'clock, that we don't have a meeting that runs an hour and instead of starting at 7, we started at 8 o'clock. That's kind of like, we felt not real considerate for the audience, because they come here for a 7 o'clock council meeting. The meeting should start at 7 o'clock for them. If we have a caucus meeting before it, and it's an open one, like I said, you're being rather optimistic that it's going to be only 25 minutes. So,
I'm okay with it either way. I can see your
Yeah.
point on that, but yeah.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all. Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Let me mention something. It was said that I'm very good at holding up legislation by a senior council member, but
When did I say that?
that's not true.
Council, please, let's keep the discussion to the rules.
What I am very good at is following the chart, trying to following the charter and the rules and the intent of the rules. That's what I'm very good at. And I just want to mention that, if we needed to have legislation brought forward onto a caucus, for whatever reason, we have in the past, and we can call special meetings to do just that. So we could actually call, if you want to go off what's on the council agenda for that night, we could call a special meeting. I know it'd be kind of redundant, but a special meeting before that meeting or after to pull something. There's other ways of doing it. So there's all kinds of ways in our charter and our rules where we can pass something if need be, and we're all on the same page on it. So again, we're doing something that's allowing fast track of legislation rather than just making us do the right thing and follow the proper procedures. Because there is a reason that we have to suspend the rules. We're supposed to have 3 readings. Thank you.
Council, any other discussion? Seeing no other discussion? Chair will accept the motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think I would like to hold off until the next caucus meeting and adjust these times and make sure that everything is in place throughout
Okay,
the rules before we move forward on that. But I will intend to move forward with it at the next caucus.
okay. So you want to make a motion to move Rule 5 to the next caucus agenda?
Yeah, rules 3 and 5. 'cause we have
Rules
to-
3 and 5 to
we
the
have to
next
adjust
caucus
the
agenda?
time.
Okay, is there support for that motion?
Support.
Okay. Okay, so the motion is to move rule number 3 and 5 to the next caucus agenda, which is August 22nd. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll ask the clerk please call the roll to move the rule number 3 and 5 to the August 22nd caucus agenda.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes?
Persia,
Yes.
Troyer,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
carried.
Okay, that motion has been approved. Is there any other activity or discussion under item number 1?
At this time, Mr. Chairman.
Take action on everything? Okay, all right,
So we're good.
okay. So
Once
since,
we take action, we're good.
okay, since action has been taken on these items, we'll move to item number 2, which is the 2017 appropriations. Council recommendations for amendments per Council President Astorino. The purpose here, Council, is, as you know, from the other meetings that we've had, it's been reported by the Finance Department that they're going to be taking a look at reallocating some of the proposed appropriation amounts within the capital improvement and such. So what I thought was take the opportunity at this time to maybe make some recommendations to the administration and for them to consider when they're taking a look at these, the reallocations that they're going to be making, so that maybe council can make some suggestions to them to take, before they make their changes. Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Through the chair to the finance director, can you give me an idea, of general terms, where we're going with this, what you see as changes?
Through the chair to Councilman Troyer, you mean as far as the changes that we're going to be making once the ordinance comes forward?
Yeah,
Is that what you're
what
asking?
changes are going to be on the ordinance?
So we'll be reallocating dollars within the capital improvement fund.
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
so
For-
it'll be just moving from, say, department to department. So maybe moving monies from police to fire. And it'll be a net zero change.
Okay, I understand that, yeah. So what kind of money, do you have an amount of what might be changed within capital improvement?
It'll
What's-
be a net zero. There's not gonna be an
Uh,
increase to the
Well,
appropriation.
yeah, but how much money is going to be moved around?
I don't have that information
Okay,
yet.
because we got, there's some things, city hall parking, security phone system, I don't know if we've done that. And, you know, there's things that probably aren't gonna get done, probably even the dog park isn't gonna get done this year. So there's some things that probably won't get done this year, and I think that's what we have to look at, what's not gonna get done, and that's what's gonna be available. And then I'd like to see, again, as we talked about, and council's talked about, crack seal, you know, adding some of that excess money to crack sealing, and of course, any kind of road repairs for the roads that need, in my opinion, the joints ground out and patched. I'd like to add some money for that, but crack seal is a big one. Road repair, maybe a little more money for the HMAP program. I'm not sure where we're at on that. I mean, that's one of the things we might want to put more money into. And a big one, I don't know what kind of money you're talking about. Yeah, but the big one is to if there's substantial amounts, big one's the pool roof. Pool roof needs to be fixed, and not just for the pool. And it's that big elephant in the room, that elephant above the pool and other areas that really needs to be fixed and really needs to address. So if you could, search through this and see what kind of money you can pull out, because I know some of this stuff isn't going to get done, and if we could transfer that and start working on the pool roof, there's probably time this year to get it done. And it is in bad shape. I don't think anybody should be in that room, in certain parts of that room, because I think that one corner is getting dangerous. Now, keep in mind that the pool roof also covers the stands, and that one workout area and the bathroom and some offices over there. That pool roof covers all that. If you can see, the roof leaks right by the hallway. So that pool roof goes from the other side of the west side of the pool all the way over to those workout areas. I think it's Nautilus, whatever you used to call that stuff. And the bathrooms off the hallway and those little offices off the hallway. That roof covers all that stuff. So, I don't know. It needs to be done. We have no choice. It has to be done. Now somebody's, you're going to hear, lower roof, whatever, and then we've been told it's going to cost $1 million to remove the roof, but we got a high quote of 800 something to replace the roof with the 15-year warranty. I think the 15-year warranty replacing is a better deal than spending $1 million to take it out, and then you don't have a roof over your workout area if you take that. So I would like to see us figure out, get some money together to do that roof, get some good estimates, because I think they could be much lower, and get that pool roof done. For starters, crack seal, the HMAP, and anything we can do to make these roads better. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'm glad the councilman addressed the needs. As Greg said, the appropriation generally for the capital improvement fund will not allow anything that you've just basically talked about. We may have remaining, when the final determination on the road money, we may have enough to increase the crack seal will be done on the road improvement. I had a preliminary review of the situation over the structure at the pool. It's more than the roof. It is the brickwork. I had a preliminary thing done, and within the capital improvement, I'm going to retain an engineer at the cost of $28,000 to assess exactly what the situation that would be within the existing capital improvement money. You're wrong. We are going to be making the improvements to the city hall this year. We're now getting proposals on council's site, and on the phones has been in process, and the architecture is being completed with the architects on the space planning of the facility over there. So as soon as it is in more detailed form, council will get that. So we do intend on spending that money. As far as the HMAC program, there's not sufficient funds for that program, and I think we have to look at that next year. We do have a pending interest in one of our properties on Brook Park Road. We've had an appraisal done. We've had a tentative offer. We don't think it's enough. If that amount comes, we could substantially use that money out of community development, which should go back to, because that's where we bought the property from. That would substantially increase the HMAP ability to help our citizens. And when we talked about, we'd also like to help them in the waterproofing area, because we're seeing more. So I hope we just got a preliminary offer today from an agent on the purchase of the property. I hope very soon to report that to council. So there could be potential sources, but basically within the budget right now, we don't see an increase in appropriation, just moving things within the various cost centers. We have some leases that came in less than we thought, some came in more than we thought, so we're going to move those things around. So the only available area that may be available is the crack seal if the final analysis of the bids on the road projects come forward. So I'm glad the pool, the structure is much more than the pool over there. We have some failing support systems which make us of some concern, and clearly there's nobody in that area now, and we may or may not, depending upon the analysis coming forward, have to take further action. But clearly, there's going to have to be dealt with one way or the other in the next budget, whether we borrow the money or can pay for it cash. But I think it's going to be way in the excess of $1 million to correct our problems over there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure thing. Council, anyone else? Seeing no one else, we'll go back to Mr. Troyer again.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Yes, the longer we wait to do that roof, the more it'll cost. Through the chair to the finance director, Mr. Single, it is true that generally that we have that percentage that goes into capital improvement, and you can't use that for general fund appropriations, correct?
Through the chair, Councilman Short, correct.
Right. And that's what the mayor was alluding to. But in this current budget that we're under, we transferred a whole bunch of money out of the general fund to the capital improvement, correct?
Through the chair to Councilman Short, that's correct, and that's permissible.
All right, and yes, that's permissible to transfer from the general fund into the capital improvement fund. And it's also permissible, if you don't use that particular, to transfer it back into the general fund, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so yes, as the mayor alluded to, generally you could not transfer money from the capital back into the general fund based on a percentage, but since we transferred, I think, 3.5 million, 3.2 million, something like that, from the general fund into capital improvement, we could transfer that much back into the general fund from the capital improvement, correct?
If it's not used and available,
Right.
it would go back to the general fund. Correct.
Okay, so we can transfer stuff we didn't use in capital up to that amount back into the general fund.
Whatever isn't used
Right.
would go back to the general fund.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Everything that the council talked about was a capital expense. He didn't talk about the transfer. Certainly you can do that. And the reason we transferred, because the situation was created where we had that $3 million for roads, and I don't think anybody argues it should be spent on roads. So the administration is not anticipating transferring any money back. You made a statement that we're not going to do these things, and I said to you, we are going to do them as council appropriated for them to be done. So everything you talked about, except the HMAP program, was a capital improvement.
Okay, anyone else from council have any recommendations to put forward to the administration for consideration? Okay, seeing no other activity, Chair will accept a motion that item number 2 has been discussed.
So moved, Mr. Chairman. Support.
The motion has been made, properly supported. Clerk, please call the roll.
Salvatore?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Persia?
Yes.
Troyer?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Okay, item number 2 has been discussed. We'll move to item number 3, which is council informational request per Council President Astorino. I wanted to have some discussion amongst council members and the administration here, just to see if you've had any of the same, either if members of council have had the same experiences, but it's become somewhat difficult to do some of the jobs of the office because some of the information that we're requesting is just not being provided. For example, council office has always been provided the department annual reports from the various departments in the city. That request has been made on numerous occasions to the administration. It has not been provided. We were trying to fill out our records, and we needed a copy of the 2016 letter that the engineer had for the 2016 sidewalk repair program. We contacted the engineer, and the engineer said his response was he provided it to the mayor's office. But the mayor's office hasn't provided that yet, so council office does not have that. And some of the other requests, I've also provided I've copied members of council on there. As you know, I requested copies of the position statements that we went through with the sergeants and lieutenants fact-finding, because we received a memo that said that there were some concerns about the cost of the professional pay and the appropriateness of the ruling. And we were told that actually if I remember right off the top of my head, we were told that the fact finder actually awarded an amount larger than what the union had requested. So I submitted a request for a copy of those statements so that we can review that to see if that has happened. And something as simple as providing those position statements has not been met, even though the request was made over a month ago. There's also another request that I made in January of last year, June of last year, July of last year, March of this year, and June of this year, asking for records, sick and vacation leave that was used by some of the elected officials and some of the administration members, so that we can review Chapter 153. And that information has never been provided to me. Also, there's I have a list of about 11 total, and I think out of the 11 total that I've asked for, I've been provided one of them with a partial. I'm hoping to follow up to get the rest of that information. But it's just a matter of trying to do the job of council office and keeping some of the records so that council would be able to review things and also confirm and verify some of the things that are being told to us. It's just not happening, and I'm a little concerned that I've tried to handle it through numerous emails, and it just seems to be not being complied with. And much of what I'm asking for, I believe, are public records, and it seems kind of that a council office is requesting public records from the administration that are not being provided. And I really don't want to go through the normal procedure for trying to get them to comply. I'm just trying to bring it here and wondering if any other members of council are having those problems. Like I said, I've got a list of about 10 or 11 items that have not been provided. And I was hoping that somewhat of a public discussion here tonight might encourage some of this information to be provided. So I'll open it to the floor of council. If council has nothing other than that, Councilman Troyer.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I'm kind of giving up on getting information a lot of times, but I think has to be at least a couple dozen requests I've had, all the way from asking for legislation, asking for a legal ruling, asking for information about dispatch. I remember on the fire station, asked for information on the response times, and what I got was a book instead of really what I asked for. And politics is one thing, but wasting that kind of money on a book just to try to not get the information that I was looking for is just outrageous. One of the recent, I think it was this past winter or late last year, I asked that the law department rule on executive session. My understanding is when you go into executive session from a council meeting, so you're actually still in the meeting, and I believe, and my understanding is that when you go into executive session, you should proceed right back to the conference room and not be out mingling with the audience and stuff. Maybe you take a bathroom break, but we're still in a council meeting. You haven't you haven't ended the council meeting. You're going in executive session from the council meeting. So I asked for a ruling on that. I never got that, you know, and I still have an issue with that. I still like to see that ruling. And there's been just many things, and like I said, a lot of times I figure out another way to get the information, but there's at least a couple dozen requests I've actually put in, and a lot more that I just haven't put in because I know I won't get it. So this is a problem, and I know nobody else is going to speak up about it because various reasons, but it's at least for me, it is a problem. Thank you.
Law Director Horvath?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I just have a couple comments. I wanted to respond to Councilman Troyer. I felt that instructing council people on how to behave before going into an executive session really isn't a legal opinion that should be rendered. I expect that we're all professionals and we know how to act professionally. I did not think that that would be something that you would need a legal opinion with regard to. I had occasion today to do a little research on a side topic and ran across a recent case that was decided in January of this past year. And this is an 8th District Court of Appeals case. And the language in it cites an Ohio Supreme Court case. And basically says that pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code, there is no deadline by which a public office must respond to a request for public records. The determination of what is reasonable depends upon all the pertinent facts and circumstances. So I'd like to note that, since I happen to be looking at some issues and ran across that. I would also want to express to you that the city departments are busy. We have a lot of stuff to do, and I have no way of judging, but I would suspect that we probably have a greater number of public records requests from council that we have ever had in the past. And we certainly do our best to try to respond to them. And you must remember, in order for us to give you a record has to exist. Sometimes we receive requests for information, but there is no record that is made. So I wanted to take an opportunity to explain why I did not write a legal opinion on that one particular topic. And also, since I happen to be doing some research in a certain area, I thought I would share that with you. I can honestly say, since perhaps June 30th of this year, I'm guessing I probably have had maybe 6 or 7 records requests. But let's make it 8. I would say that half of them are from council members. So I don't know how that would balance out monthly or annually, but that does, at least to me, seem to be a somewhat significant number. So I thank you for allowing me to express my thoughts on this.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay, first of all, I have to apologize to you because I have the annual reports sitting in a stack over there and I did not deliver them, so I will take full responsibility for not getting those to you, so we'll get those to you hopefully by tomorrow. The engineers repair program, what is exactly you are seeking? A letter of what?
It's a letter that he writes that analyzes the bids,
Okay, bid analysis?
the bid, whatever.
Okay, that should not be a problem. Why you don't have that, I don't know, so we'll take care of that.
We were checking our records, we did not have.
As far as the position statement with the fact finding, I believe we've discussed this with Mr. Black. The assessment made of what it may or may not cost, or whether or not it was in excess of what they requested, is rather confusing. You've been dealing this with for a long time. Sometimes how these these fact finders determine their awards, or even confusing the side that wins. Sometimes whether you win or not. I'm not certain that all of that you're entitled to, because the administration handles the negotiations. Maybe the point of how it was determined what this cost would be. The administration is the client. We do the negotiating, so we may be able, I don't think there's anything here that you should not have, but it may be attorney-client privilege. I know I did talk to Mark Block about it, and whatever we can provide to you, we certainly will. But it's kind of a moot point. When council failed to allow us to go to the next step, whether it was correct or not, that was most disappointing. And I think the law director should look at that as to whether or not that clearly was a conflict for several people sitting up there. So notwithstanding that, whatever information we can provide to help clarify what you need, as you know, also not required to create a record that doesn't exist. So I'll try to see what we can provide for you. As far as the records for the sick and vacation leave, I know that's been a bone of contention. To me, I don't really care. I think the citizens should see a real evaluation of all of these things to come to light, particularly in arguments that are made seemingly just against elected and appointed official. They should really see what they're paying out there. I know there are some laws that I know that the finance and the law department are looking at as to whether or not some of these things can be revealed in the form that they should be. So that's the reason I believe that has not been released. I don't know what the couple of dozen that Councilman Troyer wasn't, he seemed to be talking mostly about the law department, but when you ask for every run since Jesus Christ was crucified, they're going to come in the form of a book. So when you ask for all of that, we just don't have folks sitting over there pulling out these things. So wherever form that we have, we give you. And I'm rather confused because in that campaign, you seem to have all the information that you needed. So I'll have to go back and review your request. But again, as the law director stated, we can provide to you the information in the form that we have it. I wish, and I hope someday, we're in a position to be able to grab that information instantaneously, that we have the technology to do that, so we can respond quickly to some of these things that are being discussed out there. So what I can provide to you, Mr. Council President, I will. I'm not certain that anything that Mr. Troyer has talked about, except for that run, which he says he was provided. He didn't like the form. It was provided in. He got it in the form that we have it. So that is my response. It's been my general rule that the more you know, the easier my job is. So we're not purposely withholding anything that you should have. Also, we don't drop what we're doing to go out and create these things. If we have the time and we have the personnel available, we try to respond as quickly to things that we need to respond to. Also, the law department, as the law director said, has had substantial requests for all kinds of things. And I think it's always been the law director's responsibility. If something requested is ridiculous, is to state so. I think she's been reluctant. She's been a gentle lady and reluctantly withholding that comment so I can say it for her. Because sometimes it's administration also, well, what are you making that problem? That's crazy. You shouldn't do that. All right? So some of those kinds of things happen. So I don't see anything here that's earth-shattering, but we will get all that we can. And again, the annual reports are my fault. I have them stacked up there, and I just haven't brought them over here. But we'll get them to you. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing nothing else from any other members of council, in closing, I'll just provide to the mayor here tonight that I will provide you a list of other items so that you'll know what I'm talking about, and hopefully I can either get them or even just a response of why I wouldn't be getting them if it's considered, because from my perspective, if the law department feels they're getting 6, 7, or 8 records requests, I'm not sure if she's counting mine when I duplicate the request, because I usually give about a 3 or 4 week period to get the record, especially stuff that is I know is actually, it's an actual document in existence, so alls it would take is a copy made and provided to the council office. Again, for, like you said, sometimes the more information we have, the easier your job is. There were some things there were some statements that were made and some actions that might have come on to council to do it, and that information was readily accessible and has yet to been provided. Like I say, it's well over a month just to get us something that actually by ordinance we are supposed to be provided with, so I didn't think it was inappropriate to ask for it. But I would appreciate, like I said, I will provide you a list, hopefully by tomorrow, and then you can either, it'll be a checklist, and you can either get it, or I'll find out that we're not gonna get it.
Okay,
So,
before you leave that, you made specifically that an ordinance exists that you were supposed to be provided something. Can you clarify that for me this evening?
It's ordinance 150, it's in the 153, I think it's 153.18. It's the one it's the Wage Review Committee, where,
I can answer your question on that. It's by the call of the mayor.
no, well, but there's,
I can answer your question.
I-
I'm going to answer your question. You raised the issue. It's by the call of the mayor.
that's
Okay.
by the call of the mayor for meetings.
That's by call of the mayor. That's impaneled, period. It's the beginning sentence of that. I'm trying to answer your question.
Now,
And the reason that legislation was put in there is so that folks wouldn't be going behind the administration's back in negotiation to individual councilmen. And that, in fact, occurred in this instance. So I will, if you point it to me, and I will answer it to you in writing, but that's the fact. I didn't call it. I'm not compelled to call it. And a matter of fact, it's a changing in the elected bargaining bill, which you know limits the legislative authority to simple approval or disapproval, and they have no other role. So I'll be happy to answer that question for you.
Okay, but that ordinance also says you'll provide us with proposals and counter proposals that were provided. It has nothing to do
By my
at
call.
the meeting, no, the meeting,
my call,
that- that's
you know
for,
what it says.
at the call is for the meetings.
Okay, by the call, it doesn't exist. It's not impaneled. There's no requirements. of
Okay, well, we have a
anyone, sir.
difference of opinion on this, Mayor, so we won't
That's right.
go
You
through
have
it.
yours, and you'll get my answer.
Okay, so council, I'll take a motion that item number 3 has been discussed.
So made.
Support.
Motion has been made, properly supported. Clerk, please call the roll.
Scott,
Yes.
Persia,
Yes?
Salvatore,
Yes.
Troyer,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Item number 3 has been discussed. That completes the items under number 4 under discussion. So we'll move to item number 5, Legislative Committee, Chairman Troyer.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Legislative Committee has one item on tonight's agenda. Item number 1 is a resolution honoring Dorothy McCooch for celebrating her 100th birthday on August 15th, 2017, and declaring an emergency. Introduced by Councilwoman Powers. She was unable to attend tonight. I just want to mention that this, our next council meeting, I believe, is on the 15th, so it'd be nice to get this past that day. Mr. Salvatore, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to place on the next council agenda. And also, I'd like to highlight a typo. If we could change it before then, in the first whereas.
First where is?
Okay.
She was
Yeah, she was born in
1917?
2017.
Okay, where you at?
First one.
First line,
line.
it says 2017, just change it to 1917.
Right. Okay, can we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay. Motion made by Councilman Salvatore, properly seconded by Councilwoman McDonald. Sorry. Keep doing that.
2 N's, 2 L's. You can do, don't worry. Happens every day.
Anyhow, to change the 2017 to 1917. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Clerk, please call the roll.
Salvatore,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Troyer,
Yes.
Persia,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Okay, council, I'd like to again mention, anybody else wanted to speak and discuss this? Seeing none. I want to mention again that would like to pass this under suspension at the next meeting, because will be her birthday. And I'm sure Councilman Salvatore is asking about co-sponsors, and I will, in this one instance, speak for Councilwoman Powers, and I'm sure she would accept co-sponsors on this, so anybody not want to be a co-sponsor on this? Seeing no one, everyone wants to be a co-sponsor.
I know you like to try to read my mind, but that's not what I was gonna say.
Okay. Okay, so everybody's going to be a co-sponsor. Go ahead, Mr. Salvatore.
I would like to be a co-sponsor now that you offer, but I wasn't going to assure you that, I'm sure that, speaking for myself, I definitely would vote to suspend to recognize this lady on such a festive occasion.
Right. Okay, good to know. Okay, looking for a motion to place, you
There's already one there,
did that.
been properly supported.
Okay.
All you gotta do is call the roll.
Did I call the roll yet? No, okay.
No, you
No, we
didn't.
amended first.
He's in the weeds.
Okay,
He's in the
thank
weeds
you.
again.
All right, clerk, please call the roll, since there's no more discussion.
Like Carl just said, you must be in the weeds again. Carl likes to
Salvatore?
cringe. Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Troyer,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Okay, we'll see that on the next regularly scheduled council meeting, August 15th. And that concludes the Legislative Committee's agenda for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes items under number 5 on page 1, so we'll move to page 2. Item number 6 is the Safety Committee, Chairman Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few weeks back, at your request, you asked me to bring this out, and I did. And then you asked me at that meeting to put it back in committee, and I did. And now it shows up on the agenda again. I was just curious as to, how did this get back on the agenda?
It's back on the agenda, Councilman, because it's been in committee without official action of discussion for more than the 60 days that our rules say it. Now, this legislation was introduced and placed in committee on February 7th of this year, and it was placed in the Legislative Committee. It then came to the February 14th meeting, and that's when you were, because I intended to do it, and you pointed out that it should be in safety, so on February 14th, we moved it into the Safety Committee. But no action was taken other than just reassigning the committee.
But I don't mind.
And then on May 9th, I'm going to go through the timeline on why it's on the agenda. Because on May 9th of 2017, it was on the agenda. It had been in committee at that point for 84 days. You were absent from that meeting, so Mr. Bergio was the co-chair and made a request that it be placed on the next caucus agenda because he indicated you wanted to make some comments on it and wanted to be involved in the discussion. So everyone placed it back in the committee. So on May 9th, it didn't see any action either. And then on May 23rd, which was the next caucus, it was then placed on the next caucus agenda because that meeting, if you remember, was one of our very long meetings, so it was removed from the agenda, didn't see any action then, and at that point it had been 98 days in committee without any action. And then on June 13th, it appeared on the agenda, but it was placed back in committee because at that time, that was when there was a fact-finding report that we were reviewing for the police. And so you and I had a discussion between sessions there that we would remove it because until we found out what happened with the fact-finding report. So it didn't see any action then on June 13th, which was 109 days that it was then spending in committee. Then on June 27th, it was placed because, as you know, our rule that exists before and our rule that currently exists, once legislation has been in committee for 60 days without official action of discussion, it can be placed on the next caucus agenda by any member. And that's what I was doing, is by any member placing it. But on June 27th, you made the comment that you will not allow any discussion on the legislation because you did not request to have it placed on the agenda. I didn't feel it needed your approval as chairman to place it on there because our rule allows, once it's been in committee for 60 days without action of discussion, it can be placed on the agenda by any member. However, you made a motion to place it, to remove it from the agenda. And I think my comment was, I understand the power of the majority, so you could vote to remove it. But it had a right to be on the agenda. It didn't, as chairman, it was in your committee for more than 60 days without official action, and it's actually, as of today, it's been in the committee for more than 150 days without any official action. So that's the reason I'm placing it on the agenda, because, as I said, this was introduced at the beginning of February, and there's been no action taken. It's just staying in committee.
But putting something on and off an agenda is a form of activity, and there is action being taken. But in all fairness to the legislation and in fairness to the rules, I'm going to proceed with this. And I do have one item in the Safety Committee tonight, an ordinance amending section 141.02 of the Brook Park Codified Ordinances entitled Composition, Executive Ed, and declaring an emergency, introduced by Council President. What's Council's pleasure?
Motion to table until 2018 seating of council.
Support.
Could you repeat that, please?
Motion to table until 2018 seating of council.
Motion to table until the seating of the 2018 council, is that what you said?
Correct.
Is there support to that?
I supported it.
Have a motion made and properly supported to table until the council of the 2018.
Mr. Chairman, can you hold on for a minute? The clerk needs a clarification here. She's looking through something. I think what we're looking for is, we have to find the specific rule, but it's been applied before, is I think there's something in our rules that something tabled has to come back out with it if less than 90 days. So we're looking for that rule to show you this.
If I may, sir.
Go ahead,
Councilman Salvatore's chair. So.
Mr. Chair, if my recollection is correct, I think we had this issue about tabling the council salaries. I think it was tabled until April of this year from the previous year. So, and I know that was more than 90 days, so it worked back then. I don't know why we got an issue with it now, but if I remember, Councilman Troyer tabled an item we were discussing, and he tabled it till the following April of the 2017 year, if I'm not mistaken.
It's actually rule number 12J, found on page 12. It says, any item placed on the table at a council meeting may only be taken from the table at a council meeting. If on the table for 90 days, it must be returned to the floor for legal action at the next regular scheduled council meeting. Everyone see that?
Mr. Scott, what is your intent to move this legislation to the new year with the new seated council?
Yes, it's a budget issue,
I think
yes.
if you remove your motion and remove the word table and just refer to a specific date, that would satisfy that problem. If you take away the word table out of it.
Okay, motion so made to
So you're gonna withdraw your motion?
withdraw my motion.
Carl, you're gonna withdraw your second?
I withdraw my support.
Okay, motion to place on the 2018 seating, January 2018 council caucus.
Support.
Would the clerk be able to provide a date, please?
Pardon me?
You need a
Would you have a
28
date? for
I
that?
don't have a date yet. I don't have the calendar made up for 2018.
So it'll be the first caucus of the 2018.
Okay.
Correct.
Is there support to that?
I supported that.
The motion is to place this on the first caucus meeting of the 2018 calendar. It's been properly supported. Any questions on the motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I would like to know why we would be pushing it back this far when the intent of this ordinance that I proposed in February, we're going to take nearly a year to start taking a look at it. When the intent of the ordinance was to address something that actually never occurred. The changes that have occurred that this is meant to correct were done because council and the city was told that the financial and budgetary matters of the city dictated certain actions to be taken. We were told at that time that we were running a $3 million deficit. We were told that there was only, by the end of that year, there was only going to be $2 million in reserves. And so these actions of the reductions had to be taken. As it turned out, there was no deficit. There was no $3 million deficit. And for the 2 years that we've been operating, we actually operated at nearly a $3 million surplus in the general fund. $1.75 million in 2015 and 1.1 in 2016. And as it turned out, we didn't end up with a $2 million reserve in the general fund. I believe at the end of that year, we had a $5 million reserve, and at the end of 2015, we had over an $8 million reserve and a $10 million reserve as of last year. Those numbers have all been talked about. So these changes that were made, that this ordinance is meant to do, the reasons for the changes actually never came about. So the change, and there was discussion, there was comments made that once these changes were made, we maybe need to review things afterwards, and that's what I'm looking to do. I've been looking to do that since February. It wasn't discussed during the budget process. You know, I introduced this in on February 7th. The appropriation ordinances wasn't introduced until March 14th, and it was passed on March 28th, so there was only 2 weeks that council had to review it. We didn't even take a look at anything with my ordinance on it at all. I'm being denied a hearing on legislation that I've introduced, and I just think it's important. It's important legislation because this isn't just my idea. This is what I've been told by many people that they would like to see. That if the reductions occurred, they certainly understood with the uncertainty that exists in budgeting that the administration felt that these changes were needed, but as time went on and history has shown, it really wasn't needed. You know, the reason for the reduction was because of financial and budgetary matters of the city, and as it turned out, the financial and budgetary matters never came to fruition. We actually had the money to make those changes. So for the last couple of years, we've operated lower than I think we should be operating, lower than a lot of people think we should be operating. And so I would just say that if we just keep pushing this back and pushing this back, I would anticipate actually what's going to happen, because we tried this once with a wage survey, is that it always seems to be, well, it's too early to do the wage survey, or it's too late to do the wage survey. Let's push it back. And we all know that one of the strategies that's used is just delay things, just delay it, and that's what we're looking to do here. The people I've talked to on council, I've talked to many of you, that the intention of this was not that it would be passed immediately. I was not looking to fast track this, but I think it's a discussion that council should be having. There should be many caucus meetings looking at different factions of this, because there's a lot of information that needs to be looked at. Some of it is difficult for me to say right now, because some of the information I haven't had access to, because, as the mayor said, the annual reports, I wasn't able to look at to see what happened in 2016. I could look at what happened in 2015, but I don't know what happened in 2016 because those reports aren't available. Other things other things. But to be honest with you, at some point, common sense also needs to kick in. We all hear everybody talking about it, but sometimes within this, it's just not as common as it should be. I think this is a reasonable approach to a drastic measure, to adjust a drastic measure that was taken that turns out wasn't really warranted. You know, there were cuts made, because everybody was worried about what was going to happen to the finances. As it turned out, it didn't happen to the finances. It's just a matter of shifting priorities. And I think we need to sometimes listen to the people and give the people what they want. And what they want is something similar to this. I've heard people saying that they want more than what this is. So I thought my legislation was actually a compromise. It wasn't going to the extreme and restoring it all the way back. I was just looking to return it somewhat so that we could look at it again. This is something that should be looked at on an annual basis, not just doing that. You know, this was a problem that occurred more than 15 years ago. Council had to intervene because reductions were made. And at times, you know, things went awry. You know, and then back in 2008, 2009, they changed the ordinance that allowed there to be some flexibility. Well, yes, the administration does need some flexibility, but they also need some guidelines from council on what to do. That they shouldn't have just a free rein to do what they want. Sometimes council's job, I thought, was to tell the administration through legislation what the people would like to see and provide the service that is needed. And I think just kicking this further and further down is just ignoring a very important issue for the city, and just delaying things. And I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's right. And I would ask that you know, that we take a serious look at these things. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Dow?
So when this first got introduced, I actually had a lot of questions myself. So I actually went through the proper channels to talk to the safety director and the chief of police. And that information that I received was from February. So while I think having this conversation is important, I feel like we're missing some pretty big picture people in the picture here. Safety director isn't here again, or not, sorry, didn't mean again. Safety director isn't here to answer any questions as far as safety. I think in the real world, everyone would say we never want to deny having more police officers, but what I don't know and I need to research is what does 2016, 17, 18, what does a force that's progressive in all of the different situations that are occurring now in our cities, what would that specifically look like? In February, when I talked to both of them, we're a pretty safe community. I mean, as far as the statistics then, that could have changed, but the car stealings that they had occurred around that time were solved. Most of them were because we left our cars running and things like that. So I don't think anyone is against not necessarily having more police officers, but we also need to start and stop and think, are there task force that need to be included now? We have different situations now dealing with people in our community as far as illegal drugs. Should we be looking at different task force and things like that? So I'm kind of in between as far as tabling it for next year's committee, but also I have a question as far as if the budget was already approved for this year, where would money come from to allocate changing the task force or the officers we have now, and then in lieu of all the new things as far as professional development money, how is that going to factor into personnel, and is that going to cause anything different? So I think you're right. There are a lot of things that need to be discussed. So how we go ahead and do that, I guess, is the question for discussion.
Mayor Quinn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know what the 2016 annual report has to do with this. The administration has stood fastly that I agree with the council president. You shouldn't kick it down the road. You should have a written committee and let the new council and whoever the mayor may be next year deal in the budget with it. That's the real practical application of this. We don't have less police officers on the road than we had before. There was an inflated time in the past administration. We had a rash of people retiring, so people were put in school. There was a point in 2013, I believe, that we were looking at, and we effectually did, in fact, lay off policemen and firemen. And all those folks will return to their jobs along service people. So this 175 and this 125 were all generated by us making cuts in the operations and getting at a number of 137. We went to 12-hour shifts, the technology that we use. As we stand to right now, we have a sufficient force in this city. What has happened through negotiations, okay, these are fragile numbers that you have. So ironically, at that time, I said we needed $3 million to address our problems. As a result of taking these actions that we took, that's where the $3 million came out of the operating fund to transfer to roads, and anybody who tells me our roads is sufficient. So this is the discussion should take part in, as part of the budget next year. This is, first and foremost, is nothing but electioneering, election time, creating an issue that doesn't exist, trying to lead people to believe the city's not safe. Every mayor, every chief of police would like to have as many police officers as they provide. We'll be doing a report for you to show what everybody in a city of our size has, and in this courts district, what they have. And the reality is, back in the day, I remember when we had 44 and 44, because we could afford it, and our population was larger, and our working population. The challenge of the opiate thing, if hiring more policemen was the solution to it, that would be most cost. That's just not reality. So the fact is, I think council should just read this in committee. We've beaten this thing to death. It was brought up tonight about the compensation, just like the $2 million cabinet and the other nonsense that people in the administration went through the same progressions of 2 years before their maximum, all right? So council should deal with it. It's not in part in this year's budget, and it's not going to be part of this year's budget because the appropriations we have they're narrow. Okay, when you look at this instance of the last thing that we have, and everybody can read the CAFR reports and argue about the fund balance and say we have money. We have money, but it's important that those fund balances be maintained in those reserves. This city went from spending its reserves to operate the city, spending economic development money to operate this city, to a case where you had $3 million in cash for pay for these roads. I heard these same arguments when people came to this council, and right off the bat, they wanted to borrow $7 million without any measures to pay for them. So this budget is fragile. It is working to this point in time. What comes forward is another issue. And next year, that can or cannot be addressed. One of the things we had hoped to do was to address, I think it's strange that we only have one lieutenant in the police department. Folks should strive to be administrative officers. Policemen and firemen should want to be chief. There are all kinds of inequities in this process that have to be addressed. This ordinance does none of those. And I don't know who he's being told by. There isn't any resident that come up to me and said, I want another policeman on my street. I haven't heard that because it's not necessary. It's just a political ploy that doesn't deal with the reality. So our budget is what it is, and it's been arrived at by tough decisions. None of them that had to be basically made legislatively except the budget, and that's how we got here. For us to go back without a certain period of time of growth is foolish. And we'll show you the money that's invested in the city. We'll show you how many people have new employees that we have. But we still have two uncertain things that we have to deal with here, all right? Where we went and made a good argument, and we won from the final thing on the firefighters of the retirees' benefits being changed, and council enacted giving something instead of a $300,000 gain because of the 6 weeks vacation, it became a $200,000 loss because of the 6 weeks vacation. Unheard of by anybody. All of this time off, whether it be sick or double back time or whatever exists in these contracts, cost us personnel. And while everybody thinks it's easy to renegotiate it, it is not. Where we won 4 issues in the one arbitration, the one we lost killed us. This recent thing where we had council, in my view, 2 members of council, after consulting with the same president sitting here, the equation, whatever it is, that could have hired you a personnel in the police department or fire department. okay? But it's a cost that we're going to have to incur now across the ranks that will be forthcoming in their demands. That's going to be more budget constraints that we're going to have. So unless and until we see what those decisions, that the bearing it has on us, or healthcare costs, or other things, this should be left to a full budget discussion. And all of you know this was not raised by anybody, and I would make the same arguments. We have enough policemen. We do have enough policemen in the city right now and for the foreseeable future. If things change, by all means, these are areas that we should look at. And other consolidations of various city departments that make sense. But make no mistake, we got at this level. We have available cash because decisions were made, not balloons thrown in the air that sounds nice with fractured fairy tales and looking through the mirror, looking through this budget like a funhouse mirror that distorts what the real situation is in the city. So you can throw the CAFR reports out, and they are what they are, but the numbers have been generated by tough decisions that have been made. So I think council should just read this in committee tonight, and part of the next year's budget decision, whoever sits here or sits up on this dais can make that decision based on the facts of the time. But to tie anybody, okay, and we'll be able to go out there, oh yeah, well we passed an ordinance that says they have to have these many people. Right? What does it mean? You can't have that many people if you foolishly tie this city. Because when you hire a police officer or a firefighter, your chances are today they're going to work here because they've changed their budget, changed their pension funds. They're going to be working until they're 65 or 70 years old. And you'll tie the hands of everybody else if you can't afford it long term. What we did in the past, I'm supposed to guy that's supposed to be in the past. What we did in the past was an unreal situation that we had because of the massive employment of the workers at Ford Motor Company in this city. That will never happen again. Those revenues will never be there again. So you're going to be in a constant challenge to make very good decisions up here, not just fly for a simple electioneering position. So I think the council should read this in committee and move on with it. It's been lack of action. This thing's been on the agenda and off of the agenda more than anything that there is. And I don't see any way that enacting this legislation or tabling this legislation does anything but prolong the inevitable that should be left to the next budget process. Thank you.
Any other discussion,
Yes.
Council President?
I mean, there were a lot of factually incorrect statements, and I didn't really appreciate comments being made as to the motive of this legislation. That's not supposed to be. We're supposed to talk about the issue, and to make an accusation that is politically motivated. First off, I want to say, I'm not saying that the city of Brook Park is not safe. I'm saying that if we add 3 more police officers, we'll be safer. I'm saying that we can afford to add 3 more police officers. It may not be a priority of the administration, but sometimes council has to place a different priority and put it out there and express that to them. It's happened before. It's happened before when this mayor was mayor back in the late 90s, where staffing was reduced. He thinks that police work can be done without policemen. Councilwoman, you talked about task forces being developed. You need people for that. You can't just say, let's create a task force and give the people that we have an additional hat to wear and say, you know what, you're going to do this, and you're going to do that, and you're going to do this.
And I agree with that, but I think the people who should be
Excuse me.
Sorry, I'll wait.
I'm sorry. Cost, from the finance director said, this is going to cost us, if we add 3 police officers, it'll cost us a little over $20,000 a month. It was $22,191 is what he said it would cost us. Because he said for 6 months it was going to cost us $133,149.70. That was his projection for a 6-month cost. Because when I introduced this, my intention was to have it start in July, where these people would start coming in. Because I knew it took time. It took time because, for one thing, the hiring list expired in November of last year. And I think we gave a test last month, so we don't even have the ability to hire any new police officers right now because the test was just given and they're creating a list for it. That's okay. I said, this is not something that needed to be fast-tracked and rushed through, but this isn't something that we can wait till next year's budget, because what happens next year is the budget might be presented again on March 14th and told you have 2 weeks to pass this.
Mr. Chairman.
Because, excuse me,
Point
no.
of order, Mr. Chairman.
What's your point of order?
My
It
point
needs
of
to be a
order
rule
is
violation.
you're I asked the chairman, I didn't ask you. The point of order is he's insinuating that it was untimely March 14th. That is the usual and customary way we present the budget, Mr. Chairman. Is it or is it not? Thank you, Mr.
It's not a
Chairman.
point of
Let's
order.
Yes, it is.
Let's
You
keep-
recognize me.
Let's
You're out
keep
of
the
order.
discussion to this legislation.
Okay, well,
Let's
what
be
we've heard,
specific.
because one of the reasons we shouldn't be kicking this down the road is we've heard, and we heard it tonight again, he's complaining about the 6th week of vacation, which means that there's going to be fewer police officers available this year because they're going to be on increased vacation time. He says it's unheard of by anybody.
I never made that statement.
We don't have the ability, I don't think, to play the tape back, but my notes sit there and say, unheard of by anybody. Those words came out of your mouth. Either way, it's not unheard of by anybody, because the reason it was awarded is because the communities around us that everybody likes to look at for certain issues. They want to look at Berea for whether or not Berea has a website. They want to look at Middleburg Heights. They want to look at these places. They have 6 weeks of vacation. The reason it was obtained is because the vacation schedules for the public employees in this area was more generous than what it was for the other areas. That's something that we have to deal with. But what we have to deal with is the fact that there's going to be 900 to 1,000 hours of additional time off for police officers. What does that mean? We don't put anybody there to replace that? You know, last year, we had over 1,400 hours in the STOP program that we pay at an overtime rate. If we had additional officers, and maybe we put the additional officers on patrol, on speed patrol, you can pay them at the regular rate. Will that be popular with some of the police officers? No, but that's good fiscal management. Sometimes you hire employees when you're paying out $70-some thousand for people to sit and watch the speed limits. When you could be paying $40,000, you could save $30,000 out of that deal, which helps pay for part of those employees that you're adding. You know, the vacation time, if you're going to have to replace the vacation time with overtime people, you're talking about paying patrol officers $50 an hour to come in, when if you had some new employees that only have, in the first year, I don't know if they have 2 weeks, because I've never got a clarification on whether they get it the first week. I think it's prorated. But, okay, so they're going to have 2 weeks of vacation as opposed to the 6 weeks. They're going to be around more. So rather than paying $50 an hour, we'll be paying them their $28 an hour, so $22 an hour at the 1,000 hours. Worst case scenario, you're looking at $20,000 more that way. All these things need to be looked at, because we can't just keep doing it by just cut, you know, because manpower is important in the safety forces. There's no denying that. You know, dispatch was changed, and we saw a report that showed that that threw an extra burden on the police department because they didn't have the dispatcher clerks around. You know, members of council up here, and I caution on bringing it out, because when I did it on the wage service, at one time, council people up here were in favor of a wage survey, but when it was brought forward, they kicked it down the road saying we don't need to do it now because the budget's already planned. I think the work of council is continuous. The work we're going to do for the next 6 months can set the groundwork for what's going to happen in January, February, and March for the budget. To sit there and say, well, we don't need to do anything from July through December because they'll look at that in January, then what are we doing here? We need to be here to look at stuff so that we can present them information that will be ongoing. It's a continuous thing. Many of you council people will still be here. You don't have any opponents. You're going to be here again. So the work that you're going to do now will be still there. And you won't be able to say, well, we need to look at it a little deeper. Let's look at it deep now, because you've got vacation time that's been increased. You got the loss of the dispatcher's clerks that has increased the work. There's been council people up here that said they'd like to provide additional police officers in the near future. The near future is, let's look at it now. There have been people up here that have said the chief would like, any chief would like additional patrol. So you're not gonna have the chief say he doesn't need the men. He wants to make sure that they have the equipment. Well, guess what? Last year, we approved $158,000 of equipment. This year, we approved $200,000 worth of equipment. We gave them $360,000 of equipment, which is what they asked for the past 2 years. We gave them everything that they asked for. So they're getting their equipment. It's not going to be, well, if we hire people, they're not going to have the equipment. We're giving them the equipment that they want. So all of these things, the creation of special teams that have to be, you know, there's been talk not just tonight, but previous, but you need people to do that. You need employees. You know, it's a type of job where people get hurt. There's employees that will get hurt, and if they're hurt, that means it's downtime. We need to have maybe not just bare bones staffing, we need to have maybe a little bit of an extra there in case of injuries, so that we don't get into more overtime. You know, overtime has been increasing. I looked at it in 2013, we paid $130-some thousand in overtime. Last year, we paid $220,000 some change. So it's going up. Overtime is increasing. And it's increasing as staffing has decreased. The money isn't what necessarily, because there's a balance there, but what this is doing is making the employees that we have work that much harder, take that many more risks. You're putting them at risk more often than they should be. So to sit there and say, we can either look at this later, or let's just read it in committee and kill it, that's not doing our job. That's not doing what we're supposed to do. These are the hard decisions that we need to be making. We need to be reviewing them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, anyone else like to say anything?
Really quick, this is where I struggle with the Roberts Rule, because I feel like caucus meetings kind of should be a place where we sit and we can discuss having a conversation. I don't think this particular legislation is very specific in what it's asking. I think if you're having a conversation about this, we know we don't have it in the budget. You already said it yourself. We're past the part where we could even hire anyone. And honestly, I feel like the people who should have been consulted in this, safety director, police chief, all those key players are not part of this piece. So this is the part I struggle with, because this particular, how it's written now, I don't agree with it. I'm not saying that I would not want additional support. I'm not saying that no one would not benefit from it, but this particular piece of legislation is so specific, it does not lend itself to give us the opportunity and use the people we put in those positions to make the decisions that we need. Budget is part of it, but also we need to be using the people that we hire expertise and listening to the research they're giving us, asking them questions about what they feel we need, and kind of listen to them and move forward. So I don't know what we have to do with this. Do we have to vote on it to kill it? Do we put it in for next year, more discussion? Do you keep it in caucus where you can actually talk about these things? This is where I'm new, and honestly, this is one of the reasons why I need a couple more years to learn all these laws, because I'm tired of not knowing what I'm supposed to be. I want more information about the laws. So what is the option? We have an option of tabling it or putting it in next year's discussion.
Right now, the legislation has truly had a tremendous amount of discussion.
Okay.
I mean, I think everybody got the opportunity to speak their piece. I haven't had an opportunity to summarize, but I will say that the legislation certainly had ample time for discussion. There is a motion on the floor to place this on the next first caucus meeting of the 2018 calendar year, to coincide with some of the requests that you made. Would be an opportune time to have the safety director here, the chief of police, the budget hearings, etc. Making sure that there is a test that's been given and that there are police officers available at the time that their decision would be made to hire more police officers. And as far as using the cost of overtime as opposed to hiring more policemen, I think if you had expertise in the area of scheduling, there is a thin line there that overtime is more appropriate than hiring more people. It's just more cost effective and it works. And I've had a lot of experience in that area, so I do know that there is a happy medium. There's a magic number there that overtime is more beneficial and to add another person or two. But having said that, it also could go the other way too, depending on the circumstances, depending on what we're trying to accomplish. We have talked, in fact, I've had several talks with the mayor about specialty units within the department, maybe working hand in hand with the detective bureau for things that may be popping up in today, now, the things that we're faced with in the future. And I'm sure that that's something that can be addressed down the road as well. But I think we've discussed this at length. There was a motion on the floor. The only gentleman that hasn't had his hand up or wanted to talk was Mr. Troyer. Do you have anything you'd like to say? I can see him. I'm asking you. Would you have anything you'd like to add?
I think everyone knows my position on this. I'd like to give my time to the council president.
Okay.
It's just simply points of information, so I'm not looking to make any more discussion, but points of information. As far as, the councilwoman talked about, she's talked to the safety director and the police chief about some of this stuff. I would just like to provide information that I've made a request to talk to the chief, and I've been denied the ability to talk to the police chief about any of this. I've been told by the mayor that I can give my questions to him, and he'll get the answer for me. That to me isn't sufficient enough, because for one thing, anyone that knows a question and answer system, it's a little dynamic and things change. His answer might pop up another question, and I don't see any reason why I can't talk to the police chief about legislation that I'm proposing, other than I get the feeling, it's my impression, that the mayor is trying to control the information that's coming towards me.
Point of order.
Which he has done in
Point
the
of order.
past.
He has no evidence of that.
What's your point, Mayor?
I mean, that's just an outlandish statement.
I
Just an
said,
outlandish
I get the feeling, it's not outlandish to express my opinion, because part of the answer at one time was,
You've been on this
why can't I
precinct
talk
for
to the
years.
chief? It's like chain of
Been on-
command.
You think
I'm not in
maybe, you
his
think
chain of
maybe they
command.
don't want to
I'm
talk
Okay,
to
legislative.
you?
The other information I'd like to, I'm sorry, point of order.
Mr. Chairman, move the question.
There's still some information I wanted to provide, because the councilwoman asked about how are we gonna pay for this?
I'm going to ask you, Mr. President, to make it brief. If I'd like to bring this to a conclusion, I think
I will make,
we have debated this
I-
long
well,
enough. I
I'm
think
not
everybody
debating,
got
I'm
their points
providing
out.
information to a couple of her questions, which is not necessarily my debate, I'm just providing information. But she talked about, we don't have the money.
That's not what I said, but keep going.
If you remember, it's
Are
not
you looking-
exact-
are you looking
I'm
for an
paraphr-
answer?
I'm paraphrasing what you said, I'm not,
Do you even want an answer?
we don't have the money in this year's budget, but if you remember, at the last meeting, we talked to Mr. Single about it. There's a tax refunds that we appropriated $1.175 million for it. Now, the city has never spent more than $400,000 in the last 6-8 years on that amount.
Okay.
And what I asked was, what would happen to the money, and the money goes back. So there's a good chance that there's gonna be $500,000, $700,000 of income tax that needs to be going through, I think, the 80-20 split, because if we don't pay those refunds, it just goes back in. We could determine what happens to it. So there is money that will be there. And like I said, the hiring process, this legislative process, we're looking at, even if we did it, they may not hire until towards the end of the year. And at that point, it could be something that changes that says, sometimes it's best, part of the explanation would be, it might not be good to hire somebody in November, December, let's wait till January. And the legislation could be changed to make it effective to what's best for the city. So that's the information, that there is money for it. You can't just say that. And as far as, there's information or access that's being denied to me on this, so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Chairman,
Mayor.
the fact of the matter is that those liabilities are payable on demand. We know that we owe them. So if the appropriation was changed, and those parties came into the tax department and said, we're entitled to this refund, you may be making the appropriation and put it right back and pay for it. I will never allow, see, here's what the recklessness is. We have to provide for potential liabilities that we have. So to recklessly make these decisions in a vacuum, just because this is the issue that somebody has. And quite frankly, most of the people that work for me are very uncomfortable dealing with the council president. And all of you get your answers to things. We are the administration. We come to you and say, if I needed police officers, if I really believed right now that that was a good thing for us to do, I would come and ask you for that. or firemen or anybody else. And as you said, Mr. Chairman, there's a balance between the overtime. We have a lot of problems in our union contracts, okay? The other cities have 6 weeks vacation. That's true, because that's the argument they use. Is anybody in the private sector in this country getting 6 weeks off? I think not. Our major thrust in the next negotiations is about this time off. The police department has made more sacrifices and worked with us the most of any of the unions besides the service department in implementing what we need to do. So all I'm saying to you is this. Let's point to management. You know the management of your council. I'll let it go at that. I've been a public manager for over 20 years. We've produced on this budget. So it makes sense to me to have the discussion as part of the budget. And if we see our way clear, if these contracts shake out, if something comes forward, if we can see liabilities don't exist anymore, our health insurance goes down, that we can provide more safety forces in the city, I'd be the first one to do that. But as all of us know, this isn't something that's there for 6 months. Okay, it's there for a long time. Let's take a look at what we've experienced this year. If we see it over another year, if our performance, and so nobody asks the finance director, everything he does and we put together forward in this budget is a guesstimate. That's what it is. We believe costs are going to be here. We're going to be, this is here, this is here. So when someone comes up and makes these suggestions with literal no management experience, and the experience of what we've seen to that management gives you cause to question. And I would match my decisions in my record against anyone. So again, I think at the very least, council should make this part of the next budget process to see where our experiences are at. Thank you.
Do we have a motion made, properly supported on the floor? Any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Michelle, would you please call the roll?
Scott?
Yes.
Perugio?
Yes.
Salvatore?
Yes.
Troyer?
Abstain.
McDonald?
Yes.
4 votes, 1 abstention. 4 yes votes, 1 abstention.
That completes my committee, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Salvatore. That concludes the items under number 6. We move to our second number 6 on that page is adjournment?
Motion, yeah,
Is a motion to adjourn
motion to adjourn.
properly supported? Scott? Discussion, seeing none. Clerk, please call the roll on adjournment.
McDonald?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Perugio?
Yes.
Salvatore?
Yes.
Troyer?
Yes.
Meeting is adjourned at 9:28. Thank you very much.